Joe, primetime matchup. But I say that, but it's 11 a.m. But game day is going to be there. Josh Pate's going to be there. And our good buddy Chris Phillips is going to be there. LSU, South Carolina in Williams-Brice Stadium. Look, I just got off my show, which I cover LSU in. Mm-hmm. And I said this, and I mean this full-heartedly. This is going to be a dogfight. I don't think ESPN got this college game day game wrong, because if you're watching what's going on in South Carolina right now, they are ready for war. I do think that this is, at least what it feels like to me, the biggest game in the Beamer era. I know that they beat Tennessee. I know that they beat Clemson. But for whatever reason, this game feels like it's massive. How do you, though, see? I told you how I feel about the game before the X's and O's. How do you feel about this game? How do you see this game playing out, South Carolina and LSU?
I think this game's super huge for both teams because, you know, we talked about last week, if South Carolina didn't beat Kentucky, it was going to be the start of a tumultuous season, and they got that win. This is a huge momentum builder for them to then add on to it, to continue to build their resume. And for Beamer, who we mentioned how his perception on like where he stands with his job, you get a big win like this, you're going to really solidify yourself for the long-term future at South Carolina. I think what you're talking about, though, how this game plays out, Brian Kelly really needs this win, like really needs to stay in the playoff conversation. South Carolina, what they've done really well over the past 2 weeks is that they've done a fantastic job of generating pressure and generating turnovers. Their offense has been a little bit to be desired. They didn't even cross over 300 yards of total offense last game. They didn't generate over 100 yards rushing. But because their defense is setting up their offense with such short fields consistently, that's what's allowing them to play as competitively as they did and why they were able to effectively blow out Kentucky. So for LSU's sake, they can't turn the ball over. They can't fall for the traps. They cannot turn the ball over, because that is how they're going to let South Carolina hang in this thing long enough for them to knock them off and to pull out this upset.
I don't think – I'm going to be real with you. I don't know how big of – like, Joe, when you put a splattering on a team like Kentucky, I don't know – like, dude,
Kentucky's offense is very, very bad.
Joe, we're 2 weeks in. We don't know that. We don't know how dominant this defensive front is. And the more that I watch Dylan Stewart, the more that I watch the interior defensive line, I'm going to tell you the truth, man. Their front seven is something serious. I know that they had some issues in the run game at times. I get that against Kentucky. Their secondary, I forget number 7's name, Everwari, or I forget how to pronounce it. I apologize that. But that kid shows up on film all the time. Here's the thing, though, for me. I think LSU's got to weather the storm early, because I think that place is going to get rocking. There's thunderstorms in the air. But, Joe, I'm going to take this one off field a little bit. Let me tell you what I think plays more into South Carolina's advantage. Louisiana's in a hurricane watch right now. That sucker's coming right through where I'm at currently in Baton Rouge. Joe, can you imagine tomorrow night that you're a football player and you have no electricity Wednesday, Thursday, and you leave on Friday? I mean, there's a lot of adversity that they're going to have to overcome. Joe, if they win by 1 point, I don't care. I wouldn't care. And I know that, you know, I cover LSU, but I wouldn't care from a national perspective. Like, these guys are going through a hurricane. By the way, the state's locked down at the current moment. So there's a lot of specific things that I think LSU is going to have to overcome. 11 a.m., game day, being there early. So many obstacles that they have to overcome. On the field, though, however, this is how I feel what they got to do. They got to make Lenore Sellers beat them through the air. You got to lock down the running game. Rocket Sanders, Lenore's himself, you got to lock him down and keep him contained. I'm not going to say you're going to stop him. I don't think that happens, but contained enough and get off the field on third down. Now, Joe, I thought that last week against Kentucky, there were a lot of blown coverages that Kentucky gave up that led to a touchdown. You know, the RPO in the end zone on the slant, there was a touchdown. The busted wheel route on the outside, that was a touchdown Norris had. Joe, if I'm an LSU fan or LSU coach, I live with him beating us through the air. Here's the comparison that I gave. And I know that it was such a long time ago, but you remember Cam Newton in that year when they played Bama in the Iron Bowl, and Nick just came out and said, listen, we're going to put everybody up on the line of scrimmage, and Cam, if you can beat us by throwing the football, we're going to allow you to do that. And I think with a quarterback like this and going into his third start, you just got to say and sell out if you're Blake Baker, beat us through the air. And if LSU can do that, which, by the way, look, man, I think on the boundary, we talked about LSU a lot last year at corner. I think that they can hold up enough against those wide receivers. They got to let Lenore Sellers do that. Here's the thing, though, Joe, offensively, that scares the bejesus out of me that South Carolina can accomplish. Joe, I do think that front seven is going to be pretty freaking good. I do think that they're pretty freaking good. Mm-hmm. LSU can't run the football right now, and it's more schematical situations than anything. So many guys in the box, and they're daring Garrett Nussmeier, of all people, to throw it on him. I think South Carolina, man, they got all the momentum going into this, and that's what makes them dangerous to me.
The momentum definitely helps. I mean, they feel like they're unstoppable at this point with the way that they played against Kentucky, which you should be. It's a conference opponent that you smoked, and you outmanned and outmuscled on defense. I also think another part of this, and goes in line with the point I had with LSU, it all comes down to, can LSU overcome some of their offensive woes that showed up against USC? Can they be more consistent on third down? Can they finish drives and not get 3/4 of the way down the field and not fully convert? They need to finish those drives. Can't turn the ball over, like I said, but more importantly, they need to win the time of possession. The time of possession battle went in favor of Kentucky last game, but it was very, very close. If LSU continues to dominate that, that's going to help them win the game. The opposite side of this, though, if South Carolina wants to pull out this upset, they need to do what they did against Kentucky. They pinned their ears back and they just went. It felt like the first game when I watched Old Dominion, when we were really critical of them. It felt like, God, it just felt like offensively they were just really rusty and trying to figure things out.
Which not really happening in game one with that many new people, man.
And not relying on what their strength is, which is their front seven. And it felt like against Kentucky, they just said, you know what? We've got nothing to lose. We've got a young core of guys on defense, especially Stewart, who looks phenomenal. And we're just going to get in Kentucky's face. We're going to go right after Brock Vandagriff. We're going to force him to turn the ball over, and we're going to win this game by punching them in the mouth. And that's what they need to do. They need to keep playing to that identity. Beamer talked about during the week between or after the Kentucky game, saying the difference that a week makes. Look at the difference that a week makes. And the difference clearly is we need to be relentless, and we need to just attack and attack and attack on defense. And LSU needs to be wary of that.
LSU has not given up a sack this year. Garrett Nussmeier leads the country in passing efficiency, leads in.
I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, leads in. They haven't given up a sack all year. They lead in completion percentage. Garrett Nussmeier is number 1 in the country in touchdowns. Joe, look, here's the thing that I think it's going to be interesting. Will Campbell versus DeLeone Stewart is great on great. Will Campbell's given up 1 sack in the last 27 games. So
we're gonna find out how good Stewart is. We're
gonna find out how good Will Campbell is.
I think we kind of know how good Will Campbell is.
True. I mean, look, he didn't give up a sack against Dallas Turner. He didn't give up a sack against Jared Verse. He gave up one in 22 when he was a true freshman.
Well, that's my point. Is that we know he's the best tackle in college football right now. So if Stewart is able to produce off of him in those matchups when he's facing off with him, that's really telling to how good that kid is.
Here's where I was going with that. I don't know if they don't move Stewart over on Emory Jones.
That wouldn't surprise me.
And see how you can attack that. Now, listen. Again, LSU's got to come out guns blazing, Joe. And now there's thunderstorms in the, look, Brian Kelly has been really good in these type of situations. I went back at Notre Dame, Joe. I went back at LSU. These road 11 a.m. games, Brian Kelly's lost 1 of them in the last 7 seasons.
Wow.
1. So
a lot of favorable stats you keep telling me for LSU.
Well, I mean, look, he hasn't lost 1 at LSU. Look at what they did last year. They went to Como last year against a team who won the Cotton Bowl and beat Ohio State. They went up to Missouri and beat Blake Baker, who's there now, and Jaden Daniels went stupid. They go to Mississippi State, in which everybody found out that Malik Neighbors was actually a guy, even though on this show somebody said something. Okay. I'm not going to say who. I look at this, Joe, and say that Brian Kelly, though, when I look at him, he normally gets his teams up for these. But the challenge, like, let me just say this, man.
Yeah.
As someone who lives in this state and has been produced by the state, I am terrifiedly worried about this game going there to an underrated stadium, going there and being in a situation with all the adversity. Joe, this team could come out flat. Now, last week against Nichols, LSU gave up 175 net rushing yards to Nichols. And I understand that Nichols, they do a lot of different wild things in the running game. How does Harold Perkins get involved here? There were a lot of things that I talked about on my show, AYS. You can go, for everybody watching, go look at it if you're more interested on the LSU side of things. Joe, the two things LSU must do other than throwing the football, the other one is they got to get off the field on third down. Because if they allowed South Carolina to run, tick, 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 run the football is what they want to do. It's going to be a long day for LSU, man. And look, I said this week. I'm going to go ahead and say it again. LSU's on upset. You said upset alert. I don't know. I personally don't think it's an upset necessarily, but
I mean it is when you got a ranked team and you had high expectations.
I mean, that's fair, Joe. LSU might be in trouble here. And look, I don't come out here unless I fully believe that the team that I cover and have rooted for my whole life is in trouble. I think they could be in trouble, man.
Well, so here's one thing, my last thought on this that's worth bringing up. And having paid close attention to Brian Kelly being a Notre Dame fan, although I don't know how much longer I'd love to be a Notre Dame fan for. Obviously joking, I'd never give up on the Irish. He has always been the type of guy that when his team's struggling in back-to-back weeks, they pick themselves up off the mat. And I think of last year specifically, you brought up that Missouri game and it immediately made me think of, okay, what happened before that Missouri game? You played a sloppy game against Arkansas and you pulled out a 3-point win, and then you lost to Ole Miss where your defense played like absolute ass. Everybody picked Missouri against you, including me. I picked Missouri to beat LSU, and they ended up picking themselves up and rallying for that game against Missouri and playing. I would arguably say that was maybe their best game of the year that they had against Missouri. So that's something to pay attention to, that Brian Kelly is great at rallying his team when they are at their most adverse situation.
Let's see, man. I think that look, South Carolina. Look, as much as we made about Beamer, as much as we made about this team, Joe, we may have been wrong, and I think that all of the momentum is riding on South Carolina. Can LSU and Brian look? Let me say this in leaving. If Brian Kelly and LSU pull this off based off of what they got going on this week, trust me, I'm living it currently. Joe, I'm going to consider this as like how teams would consider a ranked win, right? Like, hey, you beat a top 25 opponent. Watch. Because, again, when kids are facing that much adversity, man.
Yeah, it's a tough situation.
It's a very tough situation. This is going to be a tough game for them. And South Carolina fans should remember, I think it was 2014, 2015. It was flooding in Columbia, and they came down to Baton Rouge and played a game, and Leonard Fournette raffled off a jersey for victims who had lost their homes and things like that. So, look, I am eerily worried about this game for LSU. Let's see if South Carolina can build off of that momentum. All right.
This video is sponsored by the online fitness training camp presented by Chris Gates Fitness. When I first started talking about Chris, about partnering with our show, not only was I excited to have a fitness sponsor for our pod, but more importantly, when I found out about how he can help people achieve their goals, I was even more bought in, because when the football season starts, it is so tough to stay on top of things and also to be able to enjoy yourself on Saturdays when it's game day. With Chris Gates Fitness's online training camp, you're going to be able to effectively stay focused, consistent, burn fat, build muscle, and do it with a like-minded community of individuals working towards the same thing. On top of this, you're going to be able to get direct coaching from Chris and the ability to ask him questions with an access to a live Q&A where you can get direct personalized support from Chris himself. Don't wait any longer. If you're trying to get in shape during this fall and you want to be able to do it with the right support system, head on over to chrisgatesfitness.com/trainingcamp or click the link in the description. And you need to do it today because you can get the first month. Personal training is expensive, folks. The first month for only $10 when you use that code RuffinoJoe. Don't wait any longer. Head on over there. BetOnline remains your top spot for all of your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, NHL are all in full swing. BetOnline is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head to BetOnline today and use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for 50% off your first deposit. That is a 50% welcome bonus. BetOnline, where the game starts.